Victoria for Cert Vision. Today I'm very excited and honored to have a special guest on Cert Vision, Steven Spurrier. So thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who might not be aware, he's a legendary figure in the wine world, consultant editor of Decanter, international wine consultant and educator, and I suppose in a lot of ways very famous for the Judgment of Paris, a very pivotal tasting in the 70s. But for those that might not be familiar, could you just describe what that tasting was?
The Judgment of Paris was a tasting that I set up to gain recognition for California wines. I founded a wine school called l'Académie du Vin in Paris in 1972, and this was the first private wine school in France. When the California winemakers, whenever they came to Paris on their way through to go to Bordeaux or Burgundy or whatever, they used to drop in. And so progressively in 74, 75, I became so impressed by the California Chardonnays and Cabernets that I told my American partner, Patricia Gallagher, that we should do something about it. We should get these wines recognized. And so we decided, she went off to California in September of 1975 to check it all out. I'd never been to California. And she said, yeah, these wines are absolutely wonderful. And so we planned the tasting in May 76, and we invited the 9 top palates of France. And we were quite well known and people liked us, so we got really the best palates in France to come. And I went over to California and made a final selection of the wines, organized them to be brought in. And so I asked the tasters before we began, I said, we're going to do this tasting blind against some Burgundies and against some Bordeaux. Do you mind? Pas de problème. Anyway, the result was, with 10 wines in the white section and 10 wines in the red section, 6 California and 4 from France in each section, Chateau Montelena Chardonnay came top in the whites, Whisker, and Stag's Leap Wine Cellars Cabernet came top in the reds. And then the rest is history.
Wow.
So, but it was a watershed moment, a benchmark tasting, and there's a book written on it called The Judgment of Paris, the wine tasting that changed the world of wine. And it did, because it was the first time that anyone had dared compare unknown wines with the established benchmarks. And that's the only way, particularly in today's world when everything is communication. I mean, you wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't communication. Everything is communication. A wine that is not talked about does not exist. And suddenly, from one day to the next, California wines are on the map.
Wow. At the time, did you intend to stage this in a way that California would come out on top, or did you even have any hopes?
There's no way I could have done that. There's no way I could have done that. I would have been happy of the 10 wines with a second and a fifth. All I wanted was recognition. In fact, the last thing I wanted, well, I can't say it's the last thing I wanted, but the last thing I expected was that they come top. I mean, the Chardonnays were up against Baton Montrachet, and they were up against Merceau Premier Cru and Puligny Premier Cru. Well, how could they win? The Cabernets were up against Mouton Rothschild and Aubryon. How could they possibly win?
Yeah.
It's just that on the day, that's what happened.
Amazing.
The interesting thing is the tasters thought that Stag's Leap was French. They were looking, it's inevitable that they were looking in the reds for a French wine. And we did the whites first, and they kind of brushed off the fact that a California Chardonnay had beaten Premier Crus and the Grand Cru from Burgundy. That was interesting, but it wasn't fatal.
Right.
And so they were determined in the reds not to make the same mistake. And so when they came across a red wine they really liked, they thought it was French, so they put it top.
There's been a lot written about you over the years, and some have written that you're actually a big supporter of French wine and kind of the more traditional regions in France, whereas others credit you for really pushing New World wine regions and opening that up to consumers. Where do you think you stand between the two?
Yeah, I suppose if you look at my wine cellar, which is in Dorset, the family house, it's 95% French, or it's 98% Old World, of which is 90% French, and the rest of it is basically Italian, with very little Spanish, funnily enough. I'm trying to buy more Spanish wine, I just don't seem to get around to it. I love the new things about wine. There's nothing that excites me more tasting wine I don't know. drinking wine, I don't know, because the whole wine trade game is learning. But when it comes to drinking, I'm a traditionalist.
In your opinion, where do you think the wine world is heading? I mean, has anything stayed the same, or is there just always changing? And is there anything that you predict that's going to happen in the next kind of 10, 20 years?
I think it's always, I mean, the change goes on the whole time. Whether the change is led by the changing tastes of the public, or whether it's led by different wines being made, I can't say. I think I mean, there's a return to classicism at the moment, in the sense that, I mean, Italian producers or Spanish producers, for instance, there's been a lot of experimentation in the last 2 decades in Europe, and of the classic countries like Spain, Italy, and France. And now that experimentation is over, in the sense that they've reached a point in winemaking where certainly they can go further, but they don't need to go further. And they're actually going back to basics. They're going back to the soil, they're going back to the climate. They want the wine to be an expression of the vineyard. And 20 years ago, it was really an expression of the winemaker.
This return back to basics, do you think this also is what's fueling the natural wine movement as well that's happening?
I think so, and there's a lot of debate about the natural wine movement. I'm in favour of it, in the sense I'd like wines to be as natural as possible. I'm not terribly in favour of the great cult, natural cult around. Some of these natural wines are very quirky.
Yeah, and unreliable.
Unreliable. And you give them the benefit of the doubt, and I don't see why you should give wines the benefit of the doubt. So, but naturalness is a very important thing, because I mean, the more you interfere, the more you add, the more you're changing the nature of the wine.
Stephen, thank you so much for your insight and sharing some of your thoughts on wine and the wine world. Click on the bottles that you see for an individual tasting review by Stephen and myself.